I believe Ms. Smith. Presentation regarding abuse and neglect of individuals with disabilities. And for the record, on the last one, there was a Tori Roca who is present and would provide information if needed. All right. Ms. Smith, if you would like to come forward, and Mr. Young. Yes, ma'am, if you can introduce yourself and begin whenever you're ready.
My name is Kim Smith, and yes, I'm here to talk about abuse and neglect and exploitation of people with disabilities. This is not my first testimony before this committee. I came last year, June 25th. So much has happened. I hope I can make it through this testimony without breaking down.
Just take your time.
I brought 2 pictures of my brother, Brett. First, let me just tell you, I'm the mother of a child with a disability. This is BJ right here. He had a brain injury in an accident in 2005. So he is a now waiver client. He receives 24/7 care. My brother Brett was also a brain injury survivor from traumatic birth. He also needed 24/7 care. I kind of feel guilty being here when I listen to the issues about funding and the fall off of employees, companies not being able to find caregivers and retain staff. I get all of that. But this is, and we're grateful for the waiver. Thank God, because if I died tomorrow, somebody's going to take care of my son. But this is how I see the waiver, the now waiver. It's like a big, beautiful cake, and everybody wants a piece of it, right? But when you get a piece of it and you take a bite, there's a lot of rot in there. And it infuriates me, because there's a lot of issues that are not addressed. Abuse and neglect of people with disabilities. Let me get my notes. I wanted to say also my dad is here to support. He didn't want to talk, and that's okay. He is a veteran. He was a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne. And let me just say this before I get into the story about my brother. My dad was sent to the Dominican Republic in 1965 by President Lyndon Johnson, along with 22,000 troops. And that was to quell what they thought was a communist takeover, okay? There were about 500 to 600 Americans there at that time. And I think my dad was sent over there to protect Americans. Okay, Dad, where were you? Right in the back. And he comes home, and in 2021, his son dies with no protection. None. Couldn't stop his death. My point is, we send our troops overseas, we send billions of dollars, and people here at home are dying, like my brother, and he's not the only one. This is a systemic problem. It's nationwide. It's not special to Louisiana, but this is where we live. This is where the catastrophe is happening for us and people, other families like us. My son and I do brain injury awareness. We do public speaking. We do a yearly conference. We go to LSU. We go to schools, and we talk about brain injury awareness and prevention. We also advance art as medicine for healing trauma. Very powerful, no side effects. I want to tell you what happened. I came here June 25th of 2021 to talk about abuse and neglect, 46 days after I sat before this committee. My brother Brett died, a horrible, painful death as a result of neglect under the care of a provider. Our family has been devastated. Why did this happen? I don't know. Because the provider was warned of the risk that killed him. How do I know that? Because I made the call. I'm the one who informed them of the risk. And you know what they did? They decided to ignore it. They point blank told me, we're not doing anything about it. And so my brother is eating 6 feet of dirt, and our family is in severe mourning for the rest of our lives. My brother, I wish you could see his pictures, like the audience can see. A beautiful human being. One of the things about his brain injury is that it prohibited him from seeing any danger or ugliness in the world. He had a beautiful soul. Everybody was his friend. Everything was sunshine and roses all the time. He's gone. At the end of his life, he had some really severe mental health issues. And Representative Bacala and Chairman Edmonds, y'all were very, very gracious to me, letting me speak for a long time. And I want to let you know, when OCDD came up and they were questioned, they promised some things, especially to get back to me, so that to try and get some issues solved for my brother. Not one phone call and not one email happened. There's no reason for that. But this illustrates exactly what's going on in this industry. I want to give some statistics about abuse and neglect, and this is nationwide. So if anybody, sometimes whenever I complain about abuse and neglect, I kind of get a little feeling like maybe people think that I am exaggerating. Trust me, the statistics are nauseating. But I'm going to tell you first, I've been following the situation with the Department of Children and Family Services for these toddlers that have met untimely death. Last week on WAFB, Governor Edwards described DCFS handling of one of its cases as absolute failure. And as I read all these articles, I realized the parallels between what's going on with DCFS and what's going on with our disability community. It's identical. There's a problem here. I'm not sure what the solution is. There is absolute failure in our state offices. They are failing people with disabilities like my son and my brother. My son almost died twice. I'm not even going to get into it because I had, a 30-minute run in my mouth last year. I'm not going to repeat all of it. You can go and watch it. Abuse and neglect of people with disabilities is an unacknowledged crisis. Crime, abuse, and neglect frequently goes unrecognized and underreported. Abuse, neglect, and exploitation are constant dangers for people with disabilities. They are 4 to 10 times more likely to be abused as compared to the general population. That is frightening. According to the Department of Justice in 2019, they found that the rate of violent victimization against people with disabilities was nearly 4 times the rate of persons without disabilities. Nobody's listening, nobody's watching. An ABC News story in 2021 said that crimes against people with disabilities and victimization rates are rising since 2015. Why is that? It's a societal issue. I will admit that. People with disabilities are abused more frequently and for longer periods of time. They are less likely to access the justice system and more likely to be abused by someone that they know. I could sob on this. It makes me sick. Provider companies are complicit in this. And let me just tell you something. I'm sure maybe some of y'all are aware of this. Hey, Rhonda. If anybody doubts for 1 second the trouble that we are in Louisiana, I couldn't believe this when I saw it. The Office of Inspector General investigated the state of Louisiana on incident reporting. They were found in violation of federal and state requirements. I'm shaking inside because I'm so angry. What is an incident report? What is a critical incident report? It's anything having to do with abuse, neglect, exploitation, rights violations, serious injury, missing persons, death, suicide attempts, medical emergencies, restraints, medical errors, and law enforcement contact. So I'm reading through this. And this is a matter of public record, so if anybody wants to know and read the details, you can absolutely do that. Why am I bringing this up? Because if critical incidents are not being done in a timely fashion and they're not being followed up on, I can assure you that there's a whole ton of stuff that's going on that's never being reported. Between my son and my brother, they have been through too many providers to count. We're fixing to go into self-direction, which is a wonderful program that's going to give my son more independence and more control over his life, and it's going to completely remove the provider company. Thank the good Lord Jesus for that. They are complicit in what goes on. I cannot even begin to tell y'all the lies and cover-ups. I said this in my last testimony. There is a solidarity that exists in these companies. They will not tell on one another. They will lie. They will keep secrets. They will lie to the state. It's unbelievable. One of the things I talked about, and I'm not going to get into it in detail because I did it last time, the retaliation that was taken out on me is unforgivable. It's unethical. And the people that did it, zero consequences. Why? Because I'm doing what I'm doing today, and they don't want to be on the hot seat. Well, if you're not protecting the clients that you serve, that you are supposed to ensure their health and safety, then you need to be on the hot seat. And I don't mind doing it.
You
I
okay?
had to answer to the frickin' Attorney General's office. Unbelievably humiliating. And they found absolutely nothing that I could be prosecuted for. And don't you think for one second the people that did that to me didn't know that. They knew. They've been working in this industry for 30 years. I know who did it. It's ridiculous.
Are you good for a question?
I am. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Representative Bacala.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. And you and I have talked often about some of this, but I think you can't figure out how to fix things until you start blocking them, identifying the source. And when we talk about the legislative process and the executive department, and we're talking about private providers, in other words, a business, the people who provide services for you are a business, right? And they're not employed by the state, but they're reimbursed by the state for services through the Medicaid program or the various waivers. So I think at this table we often, and you and I talked about the quality and the things we talked about earlier, the fact that the high turnover, the low quality of service, et cetera, what could we do about it? And our actions were, let's increase the pay so perhaps we can start reversing that trend. I think everybody right now in the world is suffering with the trend of nobody wants to work. You can't find employees to do anything. You cited DCFS. I think every story says they're 400 people short, 175, that they can't find. They can't hire enough people, not enough applicants that meet the requirement. Obviously DCFS is in this with us as the oversight agency, but they basically are paying the bills to the providers, and I know we've talked about how do we start improving those provider services. I just want to make sure that as we have this committee, and everything you say is vitally important to discuss, that we talk about the quality of providers, and certainly the state has some oversight of those sorts of things, but trying to compartmentalize where the issues are and where they aren't is something that we need to make sure that we're not punching everybody because you're mad at one person in the room. I think it's just I just want to make that point that, and I'm glad to see you guys are going in the self-directed side, and that'll give you more control. You don't like somebody, you fire them, you hire somebody else, which maybe is the way we need to go with all this. I don't know. So again, just a comment, if you'd like to respond, I would appreciate it, because people like you are why we come here.
I am sorry that 100 other dissatisfied families are not here today. I have talked to a lot of families and a lot of clients. It is a systemic issue. I recall Julie Foster Hagan being called up and questioned after my testimony, and she basically said, no, it's not a systemic problem, which left me hanging out in the cold looking like I was some crazy mom with all of this. My brother's death, I hate to say it, is confirmation of every single thing I said in that meeting last year. I agree that there needs to be higher wages, but one of the things that I really drilled down on was training. I go through the same training as every other DSW in this industry. The training is abysmal. A lot of these people, I'm not making fun of caregivers. They shouldn't be taking care of a goldfish, much less a human being that has complex medical needs that you need to understand what you're doing. A lot of these people come to work, they sit on their phones all day, they got to go get their kids, they're arguing with their boyfriend, and if you call and you complain to the provider, well, they're so short on staff, they don't want to hear from people like me, they want me to go away. As long as there's a warm body in that chair, that's all they care about. And I understand the financial aspect of it, and I understand what you're saying about, compartmentalizing and trying to figure out where the issue is. It's difficult to unpack. I'll be really honest with you.
Yeah. Well, again, I think that the idea of going self-directed for you is going to be the best thing. Because if you get somebody who's on their phone all day, you can fire them and find
Absolutely.
Somebody else.
He can fire me too if he wants
Yeah.
to. It's not an issue.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things I came across was House Bill 251, which was passed last year sometime. Thank God it came across my Facebook page. It is a bill that basically deals with statute of limitations on prosecuting people who commit crimes against the infirm, which is people with disabilities. The statute was written by Assistant Attorney General Michelle Thompson, who I was very lucky to speak with on several occasions, and we had a nice conversation about why that bill came forth. And basically, this is the meat of it. She said by the time families were finding out that their loved ones were being abused or neglected, it was too late. Our hands were tied. We couldn't do anything. That is the most that I have ever seen being done to advocate for people with disabilities anywhere in this state. OCDD, Louisiana Department of Health, Governor's Office of Disability Affairs, nothing, zero, zero, zero. Disability Rights of Louisiana, I went and looked at their mission statement. As far as I can see, they're not doing anything to help people on home and community-based services. I'm glad for the work that they do, but more needs to be done. I wanted to touch base on, I told you about my brother's death, but this past spring, I want to bring to your attention Kyle Petrus, a young man who lived in an institution in Boyce, Louisiana, was found in a state of having been atrociously abused. I saw the photos, and I got to tell you, this young man was beaten black and blue. He had chunks of his flesh removed. His elbow was hanging out. Listen, this is unbelievable what's going on. He's not the only one. I also saw pictures of other residents in that institution. Why do I believe that? Because my brother, when he lived in Ruston State School for 20 years, was horribly abused, and we didn't know it at the time until he came home and he started talking about it. My family didn't suspect, like most families. I don't know where his case stands, but I believe he was absolutely removed from that institution. And I hope everyone else that was found, look, that place needs to be investigated inside and out. I want to tell you about another death. A 46-year-old man named Ron Brinker. This breaks my heart more than anything. An autistic man that was beaten to death by his night caregiver of 3 years. He lived in Terrytown, Louisiana, around New Orleans. Instead of calling 911, the murderer caregiver called his mother, who was the manager of the provider company, and she helped to cover the crime. The caregiver murderer was convicted this year, thank God, and I spoke to his family about exactly what happened. It's disgusting what's going on. His sister told me that a life insurance policy had been taken out on her brother, and guess who the beneficiary was? None other than the murderer. This is unbelievable. She told me about some of the testimony that was given during her brother's trial. Blew my mind. Y'all think that this is a one-off? People like my brother and Ron Brinker and poor Kyle Petrus being abused? It's not a one-off. I promise you, abuse and neglect is so well hidden, it's unbelievable. I don't know what to do about it. It's a societal issue.
Can you take one more question?
Please.
Representative Edmonds?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to the, you referred to I think you said Inspector General's report. Mm-hmm. Do you have a date on that report?
I do. It says May 2021. And if you would like this, if somebody wants to review this, I'll be happy to give you this copy.
Just tell me the title of the that you should on your cover page of what this...
Louisiana did not fully comply with federal and state requirements for reporting and monitoring critical incidents involving Medicaid beneficiaries with developmental disabilities.
All right.
What we'll do is we'll just I'll ask our staff to get a copy of that. Sure. and email it to all the members. So you can just keep that right there. Well, they can find it, and we'll get all the members, either the ones that are present and the ones that aren't here, we'll all get a review of that.
On these cases of abuse, obviously these are dealt with somewhere in the justice system. You're making reference to particular people. And all of these cases have been found are concluded at this time, the ones that you are giving us reference to today?
The Ron Brinker, the autistic man from Terrytown, that case has concluded, and his murderer was convicted, I believe, in the spring of this year.
Okay.
Kyle Petrus, as far as I know, that is still under investigation, because from what I understand, and I was sent a whole lot of information, couldn't even repeat it to this committee. It's unbelievable what goes on in institutions. As far as I know, that's still under investigation. And I do want to let you know that my son and I went this year earlier and spoke to the Attorney General's office. We met with a special agent and one of the assistant attorney generals, and they listened and they were very kind. And they agreed that every single thing we were saying, weren't surprised by it at all.
Yeah, obviously it doesn't solve the provider problem that you're referring to, but obviously the justice system did carry out and, according to your opinion, found the proper decision that the person that was victimized, that the court, in essence, found them guilty of whatever they had done.
Yes.
But that still doesn't solve necessarily the provider issue. Now, just to be clear, you can't speak for every provider, but have you made, I remember you coming to testify, but I don't remember, did you give us a list on a personal level of providers that you had experience with that either had abused or that caused you abuse in your family? Did you make us aware of those providers?
I did not. I was really afraid to, because there was absolutely nothing.
We can't require that of you, obviously, but we can't do. We're an oversight committee, and the only thing we can do is to look into what we get from wherever that is, whether it's from a person, a provider, an agency of the state. So if you're willing, you can give us information. If you're not, then we're not available. I can't find it just by looking it up. I can't just find every issue with. We're in favor of helping any of our residents that are abused in any area, regardless of what it is, disability being one of them. I speak for anybody on this committee. I know where we are. We don't want any of our constituents to be harmed in any fashion, but we have to have some kind of information in order to do this. I don't know that there's, Mr. Chairman, I don't know that today's the proper day, but I think obviously that whether it's LDH or someone, we did bring LDH to the table the last go, and if we would like, obviously these are broad brush type of elements for you guys to come back and respond to. We can do that at a later date if you feel more prepared, or if there's somebody here today, if they want to come, they could come today. I don't know what your favor is.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we get the report that you're looking at? Let everybody read that, and either the next meeting, the next time we have one of these meetings, we can use that as a reference point. So where when LDH comes up, we can get a more substantive answer, because we'll say, look, this is the report we're going to use. We need a response to that. And it gives us kind of a target.
And this also has an answer by Dr. Courtney Phillips of Louisiana Department of Health. I don't have it, but she did answer this investigation.
And we'll use that kind of the focal point for the next time we meet, if that's acceptable to. I think that's fair to do to LDH as well, just so everybody can be prepared.
I'd also want to say something about justice.
Oh, you have one more question before. Are you finished?
Oh, no. I'm sorry.
I just want to, I think, Mr. Chairman, obviously, that's the way we have to proceed, is methodically to try to build our report of what it is we're looking into for our constituents.
Of course.
So the more you can help us with that and send it to us, the more we can respond, and then we'll get an agenda item and we will carry forward.
I just want to make one more comment, and I'm more than happy to give y'all anything you need.
That's it.
Talking about justice. People with disabilities getting justice. I just want to give one example, and then I'm done. My son, a few years ago, I got a phone call from a provider to go to Lafayette General. My son was hospitalized. He was in bad shape. Coming to find out, he had been given some drugs by one of his caregivers. She wasn't going to admit that she did it. So what I did was, he called her and asked her for some more drugs, and I filmed it. I brought it to my local sheriff's department, and they wanted to arrest her immediately. When the state came in to do an investigation, you know what happened? He went and got the recording from the sheriff's office, and the claim was unsubstantiated, even with a recording of this DSW making a drug deal with my son. Why was it unsubstantiated? Because supposedly the investigator couldn't understand the recording. You know what I said? Well, the sheriff and the head of narcotics could sure understand that recording. Do you see where we're at? Mm-hmm. That doesn't make any sense. Let me tell you something. Adult protection, just like child protection, it is the same exact thing going on. I'm sorry, we have people that don't give a damn. I'm not saying I haven't met any good people, but it's about this big. Most of those people are there for a paycheck, and that's it. That's it.
Can you get one more question before you go?
Sure, sorry.
Senator Milligan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't sit on this committee full time. Thank you so much for your work and your effort, and sorry for your loss. This may be in the report that we're going to get a copy of, but for me, being new to this this issue, what's the chain of authority in this? When you start with the patient and you go to the provider, who's over the provider? Tell me what that chain of authority looks like, that chain of supervision looks like.
Okay, of course, if any incident occurs, that has to be, a report has to be written within, I believe, 24 hours, and it has to be submitted to the state.
To who?
The provider has to submit it to, I'm drawing a blank here. It's adult protection, I think,
Okay.
or health standards.
Is there what's the method for doing so? Is there a hotline, a 1-800 number?
Well, when an incident occurs, as a mother and a caregiver, I can call the adult protection and make a complaint myself, but the provider overall is obligated to make that report as
Okay.
well.
And so the report that you mentioned from the Inspector General's investigation, when a report gets to adult protection, is that where the breakdown first occurs, according to the Attorney General's?
No, I
Inspector
think
General's
what's happening is it's happening at the provider agency level,
Okay.
where they're not reporting on time because there's a time limit, there's a restriction, and then there's also a follow-up. So after the critical incident is written, there is a follow-up where they have to state what happened, what was the outcome, and what actions did they take, right? And some of that was not even being done.
Okay. I'm just trying to identify where the breakdowns occurs. It seems like if, you as a mother of a patient identifies an issue, makes a report, files a report, requests a report, it goes to an agency and they have to follow up. And then if the Inspector General's report comes out and says that there's a breakdown at whatever level, that's where it's got to be addressed first.
It's with providers.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the board is clear, and I would, once we get the report, we'll have another meeting once,
Okay,
and I would, I appreciate
Thank you all
your
for
time, and I recommend you keep coming until you get what you want.
will do, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Okay, presentation on local pharmacies. Oh, I'm sorry, I got a hand wave. Did you want to? Hold on one second. We might have missed a card. It doesn't matter. Just come on down. We'll have to hold off on local pharmacies real quick. Oh, there it is. We're good. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Kathy Dwyer again. I've spoken to Kim and other families several times. And as chair of the State Advisory Committee, I've been trying to go over some of the issues, and I made a bunch of notes as Kim was talking that might be helpful. If I'm not mistaken, and Kim, please correct me if I'm wrong, her brother died because there was not an aide to assist him while he began choking when he was on a van. He started eating food, which he wasn't supposed to do, but if there was an aide besides the driver, it could have been prevented. And so some consideration needs to be about funding to make sure when they are transporting individuals with disabilities on vans to various events, the driver can't stop and help with an emergency. So there probably needs to be an attendant, which would mean there needs to be pay for that attendant to be on the van. Okay, just a minute, Jen. Also, there's at the regional level, we discussed providers too and questioned the not just the application process, but the qualification process. So I think a review of what those qualifications are would be necessary. It was told to me that just about anybody can apply with no real qualifications in the developmental disabilities field. So I think that might need to be looked into. We've had Adult Protection Services come and present. We were supposed to have child protection, but they couldn't make it at our SAC meeting, but we're going to go through all of it. In looking over it, there's several different reporting agencies. First, there's child protection, for obviously for children. Then there's adult protection up to a certain age, and then there's the elderly. It's a very confusing system for families to know who to call. And it seems to me that whole system needs to be reviewed, possibly even merged together. You know, if there's a shortage of staff, there might be some staff in one division that could help with the other, and so on and so forth. Let's see. When I had made 2 reports regarding my daughter to Adult Protective Services, and actually it wasn't me. Yes. The process is, at least on the waiver, when there's a critical incident, you know, we report it to the provider, but we have a support coordinator too that's also supposed to complete the critical incident report. When I reported 2 incidents for my daughter, not once did I hear from Adult Protection Services. Didn't call me to ask me what happened, and I didn't receive a report. So there's definitely a failure there. If they don't bother to call me to find out what happened, how are they going to be able to investigate and prevent it from happening again? Definitely training. I've been talking about training on our state advisory committee, but not only training, but I think there needs to be some kind of certification and a career ladder. I think it would be helpful for them to look into that. Someone mentioned self-direction might be the way to go for everyone. Not necessarily. As we get older, we may not be able to manage that, so we still are going to need providers at some point, or you're going to have adults with developmental disabilities who cannot manage their own hiring and so forth, so there's still going to need to be providers and support coordinators. But self-direction is a wonderful program, and you know, and a lot of families like it. I was getting ready to move to it, but there was a problem back then, and I haven't looked at it seriously enough to go to it. But talking about, Kim mentioned Kyle Petrus. I've had communications with his mother. What happened to Kyle was not the first time. This is the second time Kyle sustained injuries at the same institution. It's a residential facility. The mother was even responsible in passing laws way back after the first incident. What happened to Kyle was, we don't know how he sustained the injuries, but he had broken elbows and they weren't attended to properly, that they got infected, so the bone was actually showing. So there was some neglect of just medical care, I mean basic medical care, that should not have gone that long for him to have to go to the ER, and he was in the ICU, I want to say for 3 months. That's how bad off he was. Then he had to go to a rehab facility, and that's when I had contact with his mother, because there was a problem with, you know, she has to also start picking out a new place because she's not sending him back to that same facility, obviously. But the rehab couldn't take it until she received this, and they couldn't take it until she received that, and I finally put her in touch with Julie Foster Hagan and some others to help. But I was alerting Health Standards and Julie Foster Hagan when this whole thing about Kyle came into being, and I was sending pictures of him, and I have screenshots of a lot of comments that were made on Facebook when this was being shared on Facebook by current and past employees about a major problem. So it's not just workers, it's supervisors who either just overlook this or aren't aware. I'm not sure what the problem is. I can only say by hearsay. But there are reports of, and alleged reports, I will say, of them holding individuals underwater while bathing them in order to get them to comply. There are reports of punching individuals in private areas in order to get them to comply. I think we might have some mothers that will say they notice some bruises on their sons, you know, that could be from that kind of activity. So there was a person that was just fired from this facility for something minor because he was trying to get the attention of the problems there, and they ended up firing him for something else. And he says they just didn't want to hear about the problems. So I think it goes higher up, and that needs to be addressed. And I'm not saying that's every facility. You know, my daughter attended Magnolia Day program, and while there's some minor incidents, there was nothing abusive that I've ever, physically abusive anyway, that I've ever seen. I think there's some people who don't understand the mindset that you need to treat my daughter and her peers like you would treat yourself. You know, you don't treat them like animals. You know, you don't treat them like third-class citizens. So that's some of the problems that I've seen. But for the most part, I would say Kim was on target. It is a big problem, and it's also in education. We had an experience with my daughter when she was in elementary school that I had to take her to the ER. But again, those with disabilities are more likely to be abused because of their vulnerability. They are 7 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than the average person. And that's how bad it is. But I wanted to bring these suggestions to you because I think there needs to be a complete review of the reporting system, and maybe even, like I said, merge the investigative agencies so that, you know, there are appropriate staff and so forth to investigate this. So.
Okay, the board is clear. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Denise Young. I have a son named Seth Marceau. Seth has autism and he's nonverbal. He resided at this place that Kyle Petrus was at.
What is the name of that place, if you don't mind?
St. Mary's Residential Training Academy in Boyce, Louisiana, in Rapides Parish.
Okay, thank you.
Seth resided there from 2016 to 2019. He was neglected and abused. I had no actions have ever been taken for this. I'm nervous.
Take your time.
For my son and for others, my son is no longer at this facility, but I do speak for
But other kids still are, correct? Other people are, right?
210 people there. The ages are from 6 to whatever age. And it is state funded, and it's also run as well by the Diocese of Rapides Parish,
Okay.
Catholic Church. I have contacted the Alexandria Police, Rapides Sheriff, Child Protection Services, because at the time Seth was under 21. He's now 21. The St. Cabrini Hospital, we spent many weekends there at the St. Cabrini Hospital. STARS is it's a sexual abuse team. Actually, the lady that was speaking, my child had bruises in his growing. St. Mary's never told me, never reported anything. It came from an employee that worked there, that when clients, I call clients people, would not do as they ask. I mean, these people have autism. They were kicked and beaten in the province. I've contacted, so over the past 6 years, I have contacted people. I have emailed representatives, the Attorney General, the Governor of Louisiana, the Advocacy Center of Louisiana, Louisiana Department of Health, and Health Standards, and nothing, and no one's been held accountable.
Did you file like reports, like written reports anywhere? I'm just asking. I'm trying to just.
I did with these places, and the Advocacy Center, which really just broke my heart, said they just couldn't do anything to help me. And my point is, why do you even have a job? You know, right now, so in March of 2022 is what happened to Kyle Petrus. Kyle Petrus and my son, at the time that Seth was residing there, were in the same dorm. And so I had brought my attention to the Attorney General's office, and I had sent them a bonder I have over 100 photos of abuse and neglect of Seth. I have the reports. I have the reports from the hospital. And I got a phone call from a lady named Megan that worked with the Attorney General, and she told me via phone that my case wasn't important enough. And when I hung up, I got another call from the investigator for Attorney General John Rogers, and he said, your case is very important. And it's when I told him about Kyle Petrus. And Kyle Petrus was tied to a bed, starved. He had lost 20 pounds in a week. He was beaten. It's unbelievable. I have the photos on my phone. It is unbelievable. He is nonverbal as well. He's a little bit older than Seth. And I know the mom, Angela, only knew about her son in that state because in that state of being abused, because the hospital had contacted her to talk about to amputate her son's arm because of the you could see the bone of the elbow. St. Mary's never reported it, nothing. So right now there is an ongoing investigation with the Attorney General's office for Kyle and for Seth, but it's been 8 months and we've heard of nothing.
Gotcha.
It's terrible. It's just, and I don't understand, there's laws in place to protect people with disabilities, but why aren't they being enforced? And why aren't they being enforced to help people? Like, I know it happens everywhere, but like St. Mary's in a facility, why are these people just getting away with it? Now, from March through August of this year, 6 people have died at this place already. So this is a problem.
Yeah. Oh.
This is a big problem.
Do you mind if I share your information? Like,
I don't mind.
gotcha. No, not to the public. Representative Edmonds, excuse me.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. Now, I want to make certain I understand. One lady from the Attorney General's office told you that your case was not that important.
Was not important.
But then someone else from the Attorney General's office?
In the same day.
Same day.
Because when she said it wasn't important, I said I need my black bonder back. And I was going to go a different route. Which route that was, I don't know.
Okay, so someone then from the Attorney General's office contacted you, and now they've taken up the case.
Yes.
And your son, Seth, is aligned in the case with Kyle.
Yes.
And that is an ongoing investigation at this point.
Yes.
Okay. And did you receive information from the Attorney General's office specifically so that you know that your son is aligned with that case? Is
not an
you just
email?
found out on the phone, or did they?
The investigator, John Rogers, had told me that there is a case now. I don't have
Okay.
a number. I don't have anything.
We'll find that out. And you say that's been about 8 months.
Yes, it started in March.
Okay.
So also,
But let me couldn't. But since that, 6 other people have passed away at the same facility while this investigation is going on.
yes,
Gotcha. Okay.
that's the 6 that we know about.
And that would be in the year of 22? You were saying this is current? Okay.
Yes.
All right. And your son now is not there.
Right.
Is he having another provider?
He lives in the home with his father.
Okay.
So,
So you have you do still have some kind of care provided for him through the state?
his father does. I think it's I don't know. I know it changes after they turn 21.
As far as you know,
Yeah.
that care is sufficient at
Yes.
this point?
Yes.
Okay, all right. We'll get the reports and move forward on that. Thank you so much for being here today.
Representative Bacala?
Yes, I know we have Ms. Sharon Jackson here with LDH, who's in charge of Adult Protective Services. If she wouldn't mind coming to the table for just a moment, please.
And after that, we'll get Ms. Susan Rayborn to speak as well. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Good morning.
I think just, you know.
Introduce yourself, you know the.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Jackson. I am the State Director for Adult Protective Services. and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the program.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Jackson, I really don't want to ask any questions. I know you've listened attentively, and I think you've been taking a few notes in the back. And as we spoke about earlier, maybe for the next meeting, I just wanted to put on the record, can you, if you came back, and I'm not talking about any of these specific cases necessarily, even though we might go down that path, but generally speaking, I think it would be valuable to us to understand the process and the expectations and what you guys can do or can't do. And I don't know the answers to any of those questions, but I think I'd like to get that on the record. If you can be prepared, just to kind of all things adult protective services at our next meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And for the Boyce facility, you all have people that go and inspect these facilities, correct?
So I need to provide just a bit of clarification in terms of our service delivery system. Adult Protective Services investigates reports involving community investigations. Our health standards section is more appropriate to discuss those facility investigations. We have a separate units for those. We have a health standards our unit for that type of investigation.
But you're in charge of both. Like you're
Sir.
just over one section. Gotcha.
Yes, sir, and we investigate in the community, and it's most often family members, not a licensed provider.
Gotcha.
So it becomes a bit confusing because the reports received for health standards are received at our 800 number for APS. And so we receive that information, and those reports are sent to health standards for investigation. So the community may often say Adult Protective Services, but our role in that type of work is very limited to intake.
So you get a report and you send it to
Health Standards.
Health
Yes, sir.
Standards, and I'm assuming you would be Health Standards.
Yes, Tashika Dukes, Director for Health Standards. I have with me Cullen Brewer, who is our manager for our non-long-term care. We are familiar with some of these cases that have been mentioned today. We probably will need more time to prepare an answer to talk about it. But as far as the complaint process goes, we are, I guess we're in these facilities. For ICFs, I think we're in the facilities annually, 9 to 15 months. So we're,
When you say 9 to 15 months, you go in one time in a 9 to 15 month period?
yes,
Okay.
we try to. If there's a complaint, we're in there sooner. So we take every complaint seriously. Familiar with the Kyle case, and we received emails from Kim and, Kathy on that case, several emails, and they were all followed up on. And that case is currently with the Attorney General's office, just as they said.
For the next meeting, can you tell us, can you bring or provide whatever logs you all have of how many times you've visited this Boyce?
Absolutely.
In Boyce?
Yes.
That'd be pretty helpful to have. Hold on. Representative Bacala, you finished?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Representative Wheat?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, speaking to the structure of protective services across all scopes, so I understand that there's a child protective services, adult protective services, elderly protective service. Now I'm hearing that we have the health inspection side of that. We're talking about facilities. Is there any other protective services that we need to know about here so we can get a full scope of who's doing what?
That's pretty inclusive, especially for LDH. We're going to have health standards for those provider and facility investigations, and adult protective services for community investigations.
And how big is your staff on the adult side?
I have 36 team members for the state of Louisiana.
And what about the health inspection side?
I think we have around 230 employees.
230.
Health standards, with probably just under 120 of those being surveyors or investigators.
And on the health side, you're inspecting facilities for both the child, adult, for all aspects of that?
Any facility complaint, any licensed or certified facility, we're licensing and certifying all licensed and certified facilities in the state. And if we receive a complaint under our jurisdiction, we go in and investigate those complaints.
So I'd just like to hear you respond to what was mentioned maybe as a solution-based idea at this point of consolidating services when money seems to be at the root of all issues when it comes to funding the things that we need to fund. How would you respond to that from the adult, the child, the elderly, and the health inspection services if that were somehow managed under one roof?
Not speaking for adult protection services, but we have certain requirements we have to meet for CMS. So those are our guidelines, and I wouldn't be able to speak on that, but I would be able to tell you that we're in communications with all of these offices on a continuous basis. If our programs if the complaint cross the other's path, we're in constant communication, and we do kind of try to collaborate our visits and go out on the same time and share information. So we're in constant communication. That collaboration is there.
So maybe I see your side with the health inspections as being a little bit different. You're inspecting buildings, facilities, and that type of thing. On the other three aspects, child, adult, and elderly, we're inspecting complaints that involve people, whether they're 21 or older than 21. Is there some idea of consolidating that under roof in the effort of saving money and improving upon the people we get to do those things? Is that, I mean, I just trying to get your thoughts on that.
So just to provide a bit of history, for adult protective services, in 2012, our services provided to adults were consolidated. We in fact had one program for adult protective services and EPS at that time. Through decisions a little bit higher than my level, in 2017, our programs were separated. Services for the elderly were returned to the Governor's Office of Elderly Affairs. So we have a bit of experience with the combined adult protective services system, and having directed both at that time, I thought that it did, and our quality reviews support that. But again, that's I suspect that's going to be a decision at your levels.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, can you give me maybe the idea of, is Louisiana the way we're dividing it into three categories to protect our citizens in these fields? Are we the same as other states? Are we different than other states? Or are we a model that works the best because it's been proven in other states that it works best?
So in most other states, services for adults and elders are joined. We are one of 4 states that does it differently. So it prevents challenges for our agency at times, and in particular, states have received ARPA funding.
So let me understand what you just said there. So you said in most states except for 4, am I reading that correct?
Sure.
Is that the adult and the elderly are classified together, and then you have a children protective services in the other?
Yes, sir.
And what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think having directed both programs, I believe we're better joined. We spoke about having additional resources, being able to fill gaps, staffing resources. That's my professional opinion on it, and an opinion based on what the standards are across the nation.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Senator Henskins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Dukes, I guess this one's for you. Kind of walk me through what the structure is of how we do survey and inspect these facilities. Am I right? We, every 3 years, do a licensing survey?
For home community-based service providers, every 3 years we relicense. We do the relicensing survey. They are licensed annually. Surveys happen every 3 years. For ICFs, DDs, we're in there every 9 to 15 months. So
An annual inspection,
yeah.
more or less.
Yeah.
And whenever complaints come out.
And for any of those facilities, when a complaint comes out, we're in there investigating.
Kind of tell me what the survey is. We heard about license and facility, but actually, are you going in there, checking the clients, checking the charts to see if the health care is being matched, or are you just surveying a facility?
Wherever the investigation leads us, that's where we look. That can be in charts, that can be talking with patients, family members, staff, anywhere, any place the investigation leads us, sometimes outside of the facility. That's where we're investigating.
And when you find deficient practice, what do you do?
Well, we create a report that is sent up to CMS, and then sanctions are given for whatever how heavy the tag is, however.
And if they don't clear the deficient practices that y'all find, is there a license problem? What can y'all do?
There's no option not to clear. So we have to receive an acceptable plan. If there's no acceptable plan for clearing the deficiency, then they remain in noncompliance, and yes, license can be revoked at that time.
Okay. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Representative Bacala?
Real quick, as per Representative Wheat's question, Ms. Jackson, and you're speaking to the elderly and adult sections being separate, is that, I don't know why, is it a statute or is it internal policy? Why are y'all separate?
Well, according to our state statute, our Adult Protective Services Act, there's language there for the separate programs, services. In the statute, it defines the Governor's Office of Elderly Affairs as the Protective Services Agency for adults 60 and older. And conversely, for adults 18 to 59, it's LDH. So we, during that period I mentioned, and just, I believe, just through administrative decisions, they were combined. And I believe that we were better supported.
Okay, I'm going back. Are y'all separate because of statute or because of policy?
I would have to say policy and statute at this time.
Okay, well, statute.
Barely statute. It's separate in statute.
That's what I got. Thank you.
So you're separate now, correct? And how long, Ms. Jack, how long have you been in this field?
I counted the other day. I think I'm right at 27 years. I started as an intern in this work and kind of progressed up the ladder.
So your institutional knowledge would dictate that we should go back to the way it was, because you believe with your 20 years of experience that that's the best way to serve the people of Louisiana, correct?
That is my opinion, yes.
Okay, no, it's good. That's why I'm asking. I mean, you got 27 years of experience doing it, so I'd rather take your opinion than, I mean, nothing against my colleagues, but I promise you nobody's been doing any of this for 27 years. So we need to go with people that have experience, which, so if that seems to be the path we need to take, I would imagine by the time this conversation is done, we'll be exploring that.
It impacts funding. I kind of hinted at the ARPA funding that was released. Through ACL, the Administration on Community Living, each state received funding in that regard. Here in Louisiana, because we have two programs, funding went to the Governor's Office of Elderly Affairs. So things like that make it difficult for our state sometimes, receiving the federal attention when we have a bifurcated system.
Well, we're going to try to fix that. President Bacala, you done?
Yeah, no, so if we combine it, should we combine it within LDH or within the governor's office? Or within the governor's office?
LDH.
LDH. And I say that because we have history, and we have we've given it a try there, and we've found that it worked, and we have services at LDH that support our mediation of abuse and neglect. We have our waiver programs. We have so many other programs, OBH services, that we can easily and quickly access by having the services there.
Gotcha. All right, the board is clear. Thank you all. I can assure you we'll see you all again.
Thank you.